2015, and it's a great day for a celebration. In just a minute, I'll tell you what the celebration is all about. I'm going to tell you a story about the greatest document in the history of man. It begins with a man named John Broomplant. Now, a broom plant was used in the old days to, guess what? Make brooms. Broomplant is the English version of John's family name, which was Plantagenet. His family was from France. Plantagenet means broom plant. Now, John was the boss. He ran the whole show, old numero uno. By divine right, even, if you can believe that. John Plantagenet's official name was John, King of England, Lord of Ireland, Duke of Normandy and Aquitaine, and Count of Anjou. As king, John Plantagenet screwed up royal, so to speak. You see, John started throwing his weight around. Got a little too high and mighty, being that he was the big cheese, and he started irritating people. So much so that to this day even, John has been called by some as Bad King John. Well, one day a bunch of English barons and bishops stopped by Windsor Castle and hauled old John off and down the road out to the middle of nowhere to a meadow called Runnymede, between Windsor and Staines in England. There, the barons made him sign a promise to clean up his act. In short, from that day forth, the people were going to have the right to leave their estates to their heirs and not to the crown. And from that day forth, a person would have the right to be proceeded against only by lawful judgment of his peers and by law of the land, and not at the whim of old John. And there was something else. Old John best not show up on their lands to steal corn and cattle and stuff anymore. And along with some other smaller issues, John signed off on those issues and added to it some rights for the church. That was on June 15th, in the year of our Lord 1215. Today, we observe the 800th anniversary of it. That promise of rights signed by John was forever called the Magna Carta, the Great Charter. Well, that promise John made to the barons and the bishops wasn't exactly given to the barons. Old King John found out that his own personal rights, divine or otherwise, were only as good as whoever was prepared to guarantee them for him. In his particular case, that would be nobody. If John had not signed that promise, they would have strung him up on the old oak tree in spite of his divine right to be liege lord and king. Now here is the big deal about us observing the signing of the Magna Carta. Those rights that the barons extracted from the reluctant John should have been called mights, for they were extracted not by divine decree, nor by the good will of men, but rather by the power of the noose. This is pretty much true of what we today call rights, which should really be called mights. We'll continue to use the word rights, and let's look at what rights really are. There are three things that make up a right. As you will see, if any one of these three items is missing, a right does not exist. First, there must be somebody to acknowledge that a right exists. Second, there must be somebody to guarantee that a right exists. And third, there must be somebody who has the power and the will to back up that guarantee. As an aside, that somebody, that guarantor, can be a person or an army or a government or a gang or a local bully. In short, some agent or some entity who will guarantee the right. If you declare that I have the right to such and such and such and such, and one of those three things is missing, it isn't a right. You can say it is, you can pretend it is, you can try to act like it is, you can deceive yourself that it is, but it isn't. If you're not careful, you could even be dead right. Do you want to know where I learned about rights? Riding a motorcycle. I learned that everybody on the road was bigger than me. And though I often had the right of way, I gave everybody else the right of way. And I am alive today after 350,000 miles on a motorcycle. In other words, a declaration of a right by itself does not make it a right. The English barons versus King John is a splendid example of how rights come into existence. In the case of the barons, they not only acknowledged their own rights, item number 1, but item number 2, they guaranteed those rights, and item number 3, they had both the power and the will to guarantee their own rights. All three conditions for rights were held by the barons themselves. King John's Magna Carta turned out to be the beginnings of common law that grew in England throughout the centuries, and eventually became the roots of law in America. That law is based upon what we think are rights and who is going to preserve them for us. 600 years later, that Magna Carta leapt to life in a demand by the American people for a Bill of Rights to be attached to the Constitution of the United States. So for the first time in history, there was a universal Bill of Rights with 10 items acknowledging the specific rights of individuals. Those rights are intended to be guaranteed by government. Having lived in my boyhood of horse-drawn milk wagons, sacrifice, and a world war, advancing to a cornucopia and a world of plenty, I believe that I have lived in the best of times and the best of places in the history of mankind, and perhaps the best there ever will be. And I believe that all to be because of the maturing, in my exact time and place, of the seminal notions of rights in those documents we've been talking about. The Bill of Rights contains the powers and the rights and the liberties which were acknowledged by a people, namely us, and of which the people themselves possess the power and the will to be the guarantors. We, you and I, have become the inheritors of the greatest system of individual rights. We have been bequeathed those rights, but not without duty. For we are charged to be the guardians, the guarantors of those rights, the rights that have made our lives what they are today. But if you or I allow one person to be carried away, or fail to guarantee his speech for you think it to be divisive, or hurtful, or offensive, or politically incorrect, or pornographic, if you allow another to be searched and seized and carried away because of a legal and probable cause, quote unquote, grounded only in the tenets of your own particular religious or political fervor, or if you allow yet another to be relieved of property or deprived of liberty without due process, who then will be left to be the guarantor of your rights when they come for you and all the others are gone? And now, if you should wish to spend a few more minutes, what follows is a reading of a very abbreviated text of the Magna Carta. The original text is a lengthy document, much of which is immaterial to today. Here it is. John, by the grace of God, King of England, Lord of Ireland, Duke of Normandy and Aquitaine, and Count of Anjou, know ye by this our present charter that we have confirmed for us and for our heirs forever, that the Church of England shall be free and shall have all her whole rights and liberties inviolable. That to all free men of our kingdom we have also granted, for us and for our heirs forever, that lawsuits shall be held in a fixed place of justice. We will appoint as officials only men that know the law of the realm and are minded to keep it well. To no one will we sell, to no one deny or delay right or justice. No official shall place a man on trial without beforehand producing faithful witnesses against him. No official shall take the goods of anyone without instantly paying money for them, unless the free will of the seller grants postponement. If any have been illegally disseized or dispossessed by us of their lands, castles, liberties, or rights, we will immediately restore these rights to them. If any man shall die without a will, his goods shall be distributed by the hands of his nearest relations and friends, giving to every one the debts which the deceased owed. A free man shall not be seized, imprisoned, stripped of his rights or possessions, nor proceeded against, except by the lawful judgment of his peers or the law of the land. A free man shall be fined only in proportion to the degree of his offense, and not so heavily as to deprive him of his livelihood, his merchandise, or his implements of husbandry. All these customs and liberties we have granted, and shall be observed between us and our subjects, and between all men of the kingdom with each other. It is our wish and command that all men in our kingdom shall have and keep these liberties and rights in entirety for them and for their heirs in all things and in all places forever. Given by this our hand in a meadow which is called Runnymede between Windsor and Staines, in the year of our Lord 1215, on this 15th day of June, in the 17th year of our reign. And that was signed